the privilege of working with some of the finest men and women I've ever known, and I am proud of the work that we have accomplished during that time. But before I talk about my accomplishments in my role as Attorney General, I would like to remind the people that being Attorney General is not who I am, it's what I do. Who I am as a father, a husband, a brother, a son, and a friend. I'm proud to be married to my wife Jennifer of 11 years now. We have two wonderful children, our son Michael, who is 9 years old, and our 8-year-old Anna Grace. On most nights, you won't see me as the Attorney General, but as a dance dad with my daughter's ballet class, or as a den dad with my son's Cub Scout pack. To my wife, I'm simply the guy that takes out the trash and does the dishes. I was lucky to grow up in a home where my parents instilled timeless values into my brothers and me. It's no accident that my 3 brothers and I are all commissioned officers in the military, and all 4 of us are Eagle Scouts. Of course, this is more of a reflection on my parents than anything else. My desire to be involved in some form of public service has always been part of who I am. This desire was realized when I became an Eagle Scout. It was realized when I became a founding member of my local Rotary Club. It was realized when I joined the Army and served in Iraq. It has been realized during the last 22 years of military service, where I now serve as a colonel in the South Carolina Army National Guard. It was realized when I decided to become a career prosecutor in the 11th Circuit Solicitor's Office, and continued when I became an Assistant Attorney General. Finally, my love of public service has brought me to the position of Attorney General. Since being elected South Carolina's Attorney General, I've had the opportunity to continue serving by leading on issues I believe are important to the people of South Carolina. Upholding the rule of law and protecting families have been a hallmark of my administration. As Attorney General, I have been involved in over 50 legal actions against the Obama administration. For instance, I was the first Attorney General to successfully defend our state's voter ID law. I served on the executive leadership team on the 26th state challenge to Obamacare. I co-led a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act. I joined a successful lawsuit challenging President Obama's unlawful immigration executive order. I was in a number of lawsuits against the EPA. This included the recent challenge to the unlawful Waters of the U.S. rule, which would have allowed federal government to basically take people's private property through regulatory action. As Attorney General, I have stood for protecting the most vulnerable in our society, the unborn. Our office has supported nearly a dozen lawsuits defending state laws that place reasonable restrictions on abortion, as well as challenging those federal laws which seek to unlawfully force pro-abortion values on people who do not support those values. Defending religious liberty and public prayer have been priorities for me. When states pass laws that compel people to violate their own religious convictions, we joined those lawsuits to protect their rights. When Hobby Lobby was sued because it didn't offer abortifacient services in its health plan, we sued and won. When public prayer came under attack, we sued and won. While I'm proud of the work that I and the men and women of the Attorney General's office have done in defending the rule of law, I am equally proud of the work that we have done to protect our families here in South Carolina. As a career prosecutor, I became concerned with the antiquated way that we prosecuted criminal domestic violence cases. As Attorney General, I was in a position to support the creation of the new domestic violence laws, which reformed how we prosecute and investigate domestic abuse in our state. Protecting children through the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is another passion of mine. This law enforcement task force was created to raise awareness of internet safety among young people, as well as to investigate and prosecute those who prey on our kids. When I took office in 2011, as we call it the ICAC task force, had 44 law enforcement agencies working together around the state. Since that time, we have built our task force to over 106 law enforcement agencies. We have arrested over 600 predators. We have raised awareness about internet safety by conducting over 2,200 presentations that have reached over 230,000 people, many of whom are elementary, middle, and high school students. Another area that I have focused my attention has been in combating human trafficking. Human trafficking is a $150 billion a year industry worldwide. There are estimates that say there are approximately 42 million victims of human trafficking every year. The U.S. is the #1 destination for human trafficking in the world. South Carolina sits nestled between two of the top 20 human trafficking hubs in the country, with those being Charlotte and Atlanta. When I took office in 2011, South Carolina was ranked by the PolarisProject.org as one of the worst states in the country in how we combat human trafficking. Since that time, I have worked with the state legislature and law enforcement leaders to pass one of the best and most comprehensive human trafficking laws in the country. South Carolina is now considered by many to be or have one of the best human trafficking laws in the country. After we passed our human trafficking law in 2012, we created the State Human Trafficking Task Force. At the time of its creation, we had 12 partner agencies and nonprofit groups, and now our task force has grown to over 300 member groups and agencies supporting the war on human trafficking. Last year, those law enforcement agencies closed 59 cases on human trafficking, and currently there are 72 open human trafficking cases in state court. As you can see, while we have done so much in the fight against human trafficking, there is still much work that needs to be done. In the South Carolina Attorney General's office, we have revolutionized and reformed the way we serve victims in South Carolina. Last year, we fought for and passed a law that consolidated all of the state's victim services agencies under the Attorney General's office. Now the State Office of Victim Assistance, the Crime Victims Ombudsman's Office, and the Victims Grant Office is now under my team. This has made it a one-stop shop for all victims and victim services providers in the state to come and get support, training, and funding in one location. Finally, this past October, we were excited to disperse over $38 million in federal grant money through our office to victim services providers around the state so they can better serve those victims in those communities. The national opioid epidemic is real, and South Carolina has suffered from it. In 2016, South Carolina was ranked 9th in the country in the number of opioid prescriptions being prescribed. Since 2011, there have been over 3,000 opioid-related deaths. Between 2000 and 2013, the number of babies born addicted to opioids has quadrupled. In 2015, there were more deaths in South Carolina from taking opioid prescription or heroin than there were homicides. There have been more opioid prescriptions written between 2012 and 2016 than there are residents in the state of South Carolina. As Attorney General, I've worked hard to do my part to fight this growing opioid epidemic. Last year, I filed a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma, a large opioid manufacturer, for their unlawful and deceptive trade practices. I've also joined a large multi-state investigation into the role of other companies involved in this epidemic. We are currently working with other outside groups as well as industry participants to find ways to raise awareness and promote addiction prevention. We need to ensure that opioid medications are used responsibly and legally, and that those who legitimately need them have access to them, while those who intentionally break the law are held accountable. One of my jobs as Attorney General is to put together a team of career prosecutors and empower them, staff them, and provide resources to them so that they can pursue what is in the best interest of the people. I believe that when it comes to fighting public integrity, our office has done just that. Since I was elected Attorney General, our office has prosecuted dozens of officials for violating the public trust. I was the first Attorney General to authorize a state grand jury investigation into a statewide elected official. We have investigated and prosecuted a half dozen members of the General Assembly. We have been involved in the prosecution of more than a dozen law enforcement officials, including 3 elected sheriffs, for misconduct. We have prosecuted 5 Department of Transportation officials and co-conspirators for operating illegal kickback, pay-to-play, and strawman schemes. We have prosecuted the Marion County Superintendent for embezzlement. We have prosecuted the Berkeley County CFO for embezzlement. We have prosecuted a Berkeley County Superintendent and a Berkeley County School District employee for violating the Ethics Act. We have prosecuted judicial magistrates, county councilmen, and numerous other officials for violating the public trust. The Attorney General is South Carolina's chief prosecutor with the power to supervise all other prosecutors. I am the only person in this race who has actually ever been a prosecutor. I'm the only person in this race who has ever supervised prosecutors. I am the only person in this race who has a proven track record of defending the Constitution. I am the only person in this race who has been in over 50 legal challenges against the Obama administration. I am the only person in this race who has been on the front lines in the war on human trafficking and child predators. I am the only person in this race who has actually prosecuted a public official or supervised the prosecution of a public official. I am the only person in this race who knows what it is like to stand in court and hold a victim while a verdict is being read. This last point of standing with a victim in court illustrates why I'm running for Attorney General. About a dozen years ago, I was prosecuting a man who had sexually molested his granddaughter over a 4-year period. He was a retired police officer, and during that 4 years of sexually molesting his granddaughter, he told her, "No one will believe you because I'm a cop and you're a kid, and if you tell anyone, they'll take you away." That little girl grew up. At age 19, we prosecuted that man. It was an 8-day long prosecution. At the end of the trial, he was found guilty by a jury, and the judge sentenced him to 18 years in prison. I was standing with her when the verdict came down, and as they were leading the defendant out of the courtroom to go to the Department of Corrections, the young woman got teary-eyed. I leaned over to her and asked her, "Why are you crying? I thought this is what we worked for." And what she said to me really had an impact on me. She said, "Alan, I'm not crying because I'm sad, I'm crying because I'm happy. Because you see, for the first time in my life, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor." And then it dawned on me that I got to play a role in the criminal justice system. I was able to flip the script and help that woman see herself in society differently. She was no longer a victim, she was now a survivor. And more importantly, I got to play a role in taking power from the bad guy and giving it to the good guy. For all those years she had been powerless, and now she was leaving that courtroom empowered. And that is what I want to do as Attorney General. And that is why I'm proud today to officially announce that I'm running for re-election, surprise, for Attorney General. And I'm also happy to have received such an outpouring of support. Our campaign has built a network of over 270 steering committee members representing all 46 counties. This steering committee is comprised of civic and community leaders, faith leaders, political leaders and activists, law enforcement leaders, and leaders from business and industry. I am honored to have the support of so many people. The office of the Attorney General, it's not my office. It belongs to the people. I am merely a trustee. I'm here today to ask for the honor of being the trustee for 4 more years. Thank you very much for being here today. Yes, sir.
So Attorney General, there's no Democratic person who's running against you, so it's basically you win the primary, you're going to be reelected, essentially, unless somebody declares. So let's talk a little bit about you running against Todd Atwater, because he's probably your main competition, and mentioned your connections to Richard Quinn and the case that happened to that. Is there anything more you want to say to respond to that? If that's the reason why he thinks you shouldn't be Attorney General anymore.
I've always believed that you don't make your candle shine brighter by trying to blow someone else's out. The reason that other people in this race are trying to blow my candle out or attack my record is because they have no record to tout or promote. They have no experience to bring to the office. None of the others running in this office has ever been a prosecutor. That individual you mentioned has actually never been in the courtroom. I am proud of the work that the men and women and I have done over the last 7 years. I think they have done an honorable job. I believe I've been honorable in this job, and I'm just not going to engage in the politics of personal destruction. That's why I'm going to focus on what we're doing and what we plan to do moving forward.
If I had to summarize what their big complaint is about you, I think it would be something like, what good is an Attorney General who had to recuse himself from the biggest corruption probe in the state?
Well, first off, I never recused myself. That's a misnomer the media's run with. What I did